I thought moving in with a friend would feel easy. Same routines, same calm. Then the reminders started. Small, polite, practical. By the time I noticed the pattern, my keys were not really mine anymore. The first time I noticed it, my keys were not where I left them. I had set them on the kitchen counter beside my phone while I carried a box down the hall. When I came back, they were sitting in a pale ceramic bowl by the front door. The bowl looked like it had always been there. Liv was at the sink rinsing a mug. She did not look at me. She just said it was easier if keys lived in one place. The way she said it made it sound like a small kindness. I nodded and slid my keys back into the bowl. The hallway light clicked on behind us with its soft timer sound. It was the first time I felt something shift, but I could not have told you what it was yet. I had moved in because it made sense. My rent had gone up again and my work was steady in a way that still kept me checking my bank app too often. Liv had a spare room after her last flatmate left to live with a partner. We knew each other from a job a few years back. Not close, but friendly in that safe, surface way. On my first day, she showed me where everything lived. Cleaning supplies, food cupboards, recycling. Her voice never rushed. The spare room had fresh sheets and a plant on the windowsill. A folded towel lay on the bed like it was a hotel. I remember thinking it would be good for me to be in a place that looked this put together. The first week was gentle. We ate pasta on the sofa and watched quiet shows. Liv turned the volume down during adverts like she was protecting the room from noise. She left used tea bags on a small saucer by the sink and washed it straight after. The hallway light clicked on at the same time every evening, a warm glow that made the flat feel staged. We talked about work, about nothing, about the old job we both left. It felt easy. I liked how the flat stayed clean without effort. I liked how nothing was ever out of place. I told myself this was what being an adult looked like. I told myself I would get used to it. On the 8th day, my phone buzzed with a calendar invite. It was called Kitchen Reset, set for 21:45, 15 minutes, every day. I thought it was a mistake. When I went into the kitchen, Liv was already wiping the counter in slow, neat lines. She said it kept mornings smooth if we both did a quick reset before bed. She said it saved time. I laughed and asked if she had really made a calendar for it. She nodded. Not proud, not embarrassed. Just certain. I picked up a cloth. We worked side by side in silence. When it was done, she nodded, washed her hands, and said it was nicer this way. It could have ended there. I could have said no. I could have asked her to keep my calendar out of it. Instead, I wiped counters every night. It felt small. It felt harmless. The invite stayed, more arrived, bin night, laundry rotation, shop check. Each one came with the same soft explanation. It made things easier. It stopped us forgetting. It kept the flat calm. I watched my calendar fill with 15-minute blocks like someone had taken a ruler to my evenings. If I moved one, it reappeared the next day. Liv never mentioned it in a sharp way. She just acted as if it was already agreed. I started finding myself in the kitchen at 21:45 without thinking, cloth in hand, like the alert had moved into my muscles. The shared shopping list appeared on the fridge with a leaf magnet. It had categories and a line at the bottom that said, "Check pantry first." Liv's handwriting looked trained, even when she wrote milk. She said I could add anything I wanted. She said it was just to avoid doubling up. I added coffee and a box of cereal I liked. The next day, coffee was crossed out and rewritten as ground coffee, medium roast, with a note beside it that said, cheaper at Aldi. My cereal had been rewritten too, the brand replaced with a cheaper one, as if my preference was a spelling mistake she had corrected. I bought my usual cereal anyway, and hid it in my room behind a stack of jumpers. 2 weeks in, she moved my mug. It was plain white with a chip on the rim. I had owned it for years. It had followed me through bad flats and worse mornings. I reached into the cupboard for it and found nothing. The shelves were arranged by height, mugs facing forward like a display. Liv's matching set sat in a row, identical, clean. My mug was in another cupboard behind glasses. She said she had reorganized so the nice mugs were together because it looked better. She said my mug was still there. She said it lightly, like she had not done anything. I drank tea from one of her mugs and felt like I was wearing someone else's coat. That night I lay in bed and listened to the flat. The radiator ticked. The fridge hummed. The hallway light clicked on and off with its timer, soft and patient. Liv moved around her room with light steps, careful like she did not want to disturb the order of things. I told myself I was overreacting. She had not shouted. She had not demanded. She had not said the word rule. It was always framed as care, as ease, as a shared standard we both benefited from. That was the slippery part. I started catching myself using her phrases. It's easier. It keeps things calm. It's nicer this way. My own voice was starting to sound like her, and I did not notice until it was already happening. 3 weeks in, she cut me a spare key. She left it in an envelope on the counter like a gift. She said she had done it on her lunch break. She said it was safer. Sensible. I held the key and felt my stomach tighten. It was mine, technically, but it had moved through her day, through her pocket, through her choices. She said she had kept a spare, just in case. She dropped it into the kitchen key bowl with a small clink and went back to rinsing the teabag saucer. I started keeping my main key in my pocket instead of the bowl, but only for a day. Liv noticed. She said the bowl was there for a reason. She smiled as she said it, and I put it back. The first real disagreement was about a towel. I left mine on a chair in my room after a shower. Not in the hallway, not on the radiator. In my room, door shut. That evening, she said in her calm voice that damp towels should be hung in the bathroom to dry properly. I said it was my towel and my room. She paused like I had failed a small test. She said she had noticed a smell in the hallway. I said my door was closed. She said smells travel. Then she smiled, quick and light, and said it was no big deal. She said she was just letting me know. After that, she started opening my door in the mornings to air the room. The door opened without a knock. The first time I thought I had forgotten to shut it properly. The second time I heard it. A soft click, then the slow pull, like she was opening a drawer. Liv stood in the doorway holding a small bottle of room spray. Lemon. She said she had been doing a quick refresh. She said it helped with stale air. She stood there long enough for me to smell the lemon on the carpet. Then she left, leaving the door slightly open, as if closed doors were wasteful. I started closing it again after she went, but it began to feel like a quiet tug of war. I started keeping the window cracked so the air would move on my terms, not hers. I told friends it was fine. I said it was calm. I said it was probably good for me to live with someone organized. I said it while I stirred coffee and watched their faces, waiting for them to tell me I was lucky. No one ever said I was lucky. They just nodded like it sounded normal. That made me feel worse, like I had no right to be uneasy. Liv was generous in small ways. She bought dish soap without asking. She replaced a light bulb before it went out. She folded my tea towels if I left them drying. She never raised her voice. That was what made it hard to point to anything. If I complained, it would sound like I was criticizing someone for being tidy. One night I came home late and found her at the kitchen table with her laptop open. The hallway light glowed behind her, warm and flat. She asked if I had a nice evening. Her voice carried the same careful friendliness she used at work. The screen showed a spreadsheet, shared costs, split down the middle, every number aligned. She said she liked to keep track so nothing felt unfair. She said she had noticed I used more washing powder. She said it was fine, but she had adjusted the split to reflect it. She said it like she was correcting a maths error. I apologized without thinking. She told me not to worry, and then she added a calendar invite called Restock Laundry for Sunday afternoons. That was when it began to reach into parts of my life that were not the flat. I stopped going to the gym in the evenings because the resets and tasks made it feel awkward to be out. Not impossible, just awkward in a way that made me choose the easier path. I started leaving social plans vague because if I said I would be home late, Liv would ask what time. She would say she worried. She would say she just liked to know. I began to give details I did not owe anyone: names, places, rough times. If I forgot, she would ask again later in the same gentle tone, like she was reminding me to pay a bill. I found myself reporting my life back to her. The micro rules kept appearing: shoes facing forward by the door, coats hung by color in the hall cupboard, scissors returned to the top drawer, handle facing right, dish sponge wrung out and placed on its tray like it was tucking itself in. If I broke a rule, nothing happened immediately. That was Liv's talent. She made it so the consequence was delayed and emotional. A sigh the next morning, a comment about how hard it was to keep things calm, a small, tired look that made me feel like a child. I started preempting her reactions. I wiped crumbs before she saw them. I adjusted the tap so it did not drip. I took my tea to my room to avoid leaving a ring on the table. One afternoon, I noticed the hallway light was on earlier than usual. It was still bright outside. The warm glow made the corridor feel wrong, like the flat was acting. Liv was on her knees by the timer plug with a small screwdriver. She said the days were getting darker. She said it was nicer if the light came on before we got in. She said it made the flat feel safe. The word safe landed strangely. It was not the sort of word you use for a hallway light. She looked up and asked if I liked it. I said it was fine. She nodded and set the timer a few minutes earlier. That night when I came in, the light met me like a hand on my back, guiding me to the key bowl. She bought a second key bowl for the kitchen. She put it beside the kettle. She said it was for spare keys, just in case. The bowl was smaller, matching, speckled like the first. I watched the two bowls sit in different rooms like two calm eyes. Liv dropped her spare into the kitchen bowl and smiled at me. I did not have a spare yet, but she reminded me she had one of mine. She said it was safer if we both knew where the spares were. She said it like a shared agreement. The next morning, I found my spare key had been moved from the kitchen bowl to the front door bowl, as if she had decided where it belonged. I started to feel that even my backup options were being arranged for me. My room began to shrink, not physically, but in a way that made it feel less like mine. Liv started leaving things just inside my door: a note about putting the Hoover back properly, a small bottle of fabric spray, lemon again, a spare hanger. It was never directly accusing. It was always presented like help. I started keeping my things in closed boxes so she could not tidy them. I started stacking books with the spines inward, which is a strange way to live, but it made me feel less watched. I began to notice how often she listened for my footsteps in the hall. She would appear in the kitchen as soon as I arrived, asking about my day, already holding a cloth or a cup like the conversation was part of the routine. The first time I tried to set a boundary, my throat felt dry. I told her I needed my room to be private. I said I did not want her opening my door in the mornings. I kept my voice light, like I was making a small request. Liv looked at me and blinked slowly. She said she did not realize it bothered me. She said she was only trying to help. She said she worried about air quality and damp. She said she had read something about mold. She said it could make you ill. The conversation slid away from privacy and into health, which made me feel unreasonable. I backed down. I said it was fine, but maybe less often. Liv smiled and said of course. The next day, my door was open again, wider than before. She started making suggestions about my routines. She noticed I ate dinner at odd times. She said it was better for sleep to eat earlier. She noticed I scrolled on my phone late. She said blue light was bad. She noticed I drank coffee in the afternoon. She said caffeine stayed in your system. She said these things with the same tone she used for where the bin bags lived. Calm, practical, not personal. That was the trick. If it sounded practical, it did not sound like judgment. I began to adjust myself around her. I ate earlier even if I was not hungry. I stopped making coffee after lunch. I started reading in bed just to look like I was winding down properly. I began performing a version of myself that fit the flat. The kitchen reset became longer. It went from 15 minutes to 20, then 30. Liv never announced the change. She just kept wiping. She would redo what I had done, quietly, then smile and say she was just finishing it off. I found myself watching her hands. She wiped in straight lines. She used the same cloth for the same surface every night. She rinsed it and wrung it with both hands, twist, twist, as if she was extracting something. Sometimes she would comment on how much calmer she felt after a reset. She would say she slept better. If I missed one, she would be slightly colder the next day. Not rude, just less warm. It made me attend the next one like I was paying a debt. The shopping list turned into a system. Liv created a shared note on our phones with checkboxes. She added reminders to check pantry stock on Sunday. She linked it to the calendar. She said it was just easier. I watched my phone turn into a small manager. I would be walking back from work and my screen would buzz with milk low or bin bags, and I would feel a strange flicker of guilt, like I had forgotten a birthday. If I ignored the alerts, Liv would have already bought the item, then she would mention it casually, like she was doing me a favor. I started to feel that my choices were being pre-made. I could still decide, technically, but the path of least friction was always Liv's path. One Saturday, I brought a friend home for coffee. I wanted someone else to see the flat, to make me feel normal. Liv greeted my friend with polite warmth. She put out matching mugs, not my chipped one. She offered oat milk and mentioned it was better for digestion. My friend laughed and said Liv sounded like a wellness blog. Liv laughed too, soft and controlled. I watched them from the kitchen doorway and felt like a guest at my own table. When my friend left, Liv wiped the table twice and said it had been nice. Then she added lightly that having people over was easier with a bit of notice. She said it helped her plan. She put a shared calendar on my phone called Guests, with a note to add names and arrival times. I began to lie, not dramatic lies, small ones that kept my life from being organized. I told her I was meeting someone when I was actually walking alone. I said I was working late when I was sitting in a cafe with headphones. I started leaving my phone in my bag so I would not get alerts. I stopped charging it in the kitchen because Liv would glance at the screen when it lit up. The flat made me secretive. It was a quiet kind of loneliness. I lived with someone and felt less seen than when I lived alone. I started to miss mess. I missed leaving a mug on a table and not having it mean anything. I missed being able to change plans without updating a system. The moment that stays with me happened on an ordinary morning. I woke to the sound of my window being opened. Cold air slipped across my face. Liv was in my room, one hand on the curtain, the other on the window latch. She said she was airing it out. She said she had noticed the room felt warm. I sat up, sheet pulled to my chest, and stared at her. She looked surprised by my surprise. She said she had a spare key. She said it was fine. She said she had not meant to wake me. She stood there like she belonged. That was the first time I felt actual fear. Not of violence, of something quieter, the fear of having no locked door in your own life. After that, I started moving my things as if I was already leaving. I stopped putting toiletries in the shared bathroom cabinet. I kept them in a bag in my room. I stopped leaving food in the fridge that looked like mine. If I bought something, I ate it quickly. I stopped buying anything that needed a shelf. I stopped buying anything that would let me settle. Liv noticed the emptying. She said the flat felt less like a home. She suggested we make a shared shelf for personal items to warm it up. She said it would be nice to see photos. I put a small framed picture of my sister on the shelf. The next day it was gone. Liv said it did not fit the color scheme. She said she had put it safely in my room. It was on my desk, face down. We had a conversation that was not confirming and not resolving. Liv said she felt like I was pulling away. She said she did not know why. She said she had been trying to make the flat a calm place for both of us. She said she thought I liked it. I told her I needed space. I told her I needed privacy. The words sounded too big for the room, like I had brought in furniture that did not fit. Liv nodded and said she understood. Then she asked if I could try harder with the resets, because they helped her anxiety. She did not call it anxiety in a dramatic way. She said it like a fact about weather. I felt my spine soften. I heard myself say, "Okay." That is the shameful part. How quickly I agreed. The next change was framed as safety. Liv said it would help if we shared locations on our phones, just in case something happened. She said it was common for housemates. She said it was sensible. I said I was not comfortable. Liv nodded, but her face closed slightly, like a shutter. She said she understood, but she worried. She said the city was not what it used to be. She said she had read about people going missing. She left the sentence hanging like a damp towel. For days after, she asked what time I would be home. She would say she was just making sure the hallway light was timed right. She would say she did not want me coming into darkness. The light became a reason to monitor me. I started to feel watched even when she was not there. I would come home and the flat would smell of lemon and heat, the hallway light already on, the bowls waiting by the door, and it would feel like I was stepping into a plan. Sometimes Liv was out, but the flat still felt like her. Her timers, her lists, her positions for things. I would stand in the kitchen and try to remember what it felt like to do nothing. The resets had trained me to see dirt where there was none. A crumb became a problem. A cup left to soak felt like a breach. I began cleaning before I even took my coat off, like I had to prove I belonged there. I did not belong there. I just complied. One evening I got home and my keys were on the kitchen counter again, not in the bowl, next to my phone like the first day. For a moment I felt relief. Then I felt suspicious. The keys looked placed, not left. A small stage set of my old life. Liv came in behind me and said she had noticed the bowl made the hall feel cluttered, so she was trying something else. She smiled like she was inviting my opinion. I said it was fine. She watched my hand as I picked them up. She watched where I put them. I put them in the bowl anyway, because I did not want the conversation. Liv's smile tightened for half a second. Then she went to rinse the teabag saucer. The keys had been a test, and I had failed it. I began planning to leave in private, which meant I began living in private too. I kept my headphones on around the flat. I ate in my room. I took calls outside. I stopped telling Liv about my day. She responded by becoming kinder. She made soup and offered me a bowl. She bought my favorite biscuits and put them on the counter with a casual comment about a special offer. She asked if I was sleeping okay. She said my eyes looked tired. She said she had a pillow spray that might help. Her kindness felt like a hand on the back of my neck, steering me toward a shape. I started to distrust nice things. That is what quiet control does. It makes generosity feel like a lever. The day I decided for certain was boring. Nothing big happened. That was the strange part. I was standing in the hall, putting on my shoes, and I realized I was waiting for the hallway light to click off before I left, even though it was daytime. I was timing my exit around her timers. I was arranging my movements around her systems. I could have walked out at any moment, but I was still checking if I was doing it correctly. I looked at the key bowl and felt a sudden clarity. The bowl was not a bowl. It was a way to put my hand where she wanted it. I went to my room and sat on the bed. I looked at my calendar full of her reminders. I deleted them all in one sweep, like pulling weeds. My screen went quiet. I felt my shoulders drop. That night, Liv asked why the invites were gone. Her voice was calm, but the question had an edge, like a paper cut. I said I needed my calendar back. Liv stared at me for a moment, then smiled in a small, controlled way. She said she understood. She said she had only been trying to help. Then she said the reset still needed doing, with or without a reminder. She said it like a rule disguised as a fact. I did not argue. I just nodded. Later, in my room, I wrote a list of flats to view on a piece of paper because I did not want it on my phone. I folded the paper and put it inside a book like I was hiding evidence. That was when I understood how far it had gone. I started viewing rooms. I said I was meeting friends. I kept my voice casual. Liv asked names. I gave vague answers. She asked times. I gave rough windows. She watched me put my keys in the bowl. She watched my shoes align at the door. The flat became thick with politeness. Liv was always pleasant, always tidy, always calm. It felt like living inside a smile. One afternoon I came back and found my wardrobe door open. My clothes had been refolded. Not badly, carefully, like a shop. Liv said she had noticed I had a lot of creases and she thought she was helping. My stomach turned. I did not shout. I just said, "Please do not." Liv nodded and said, of course. Her eyes looked glossy, like she had been hurt. I apologized. Again. On my last week there, I stopped using the key bowls. I kept my key in my pocket. Liv noticed immediately. She said she had been looking for it. She said she panicked. She said she thought I had lost it. I said it was in my pocket. She laughed softly, like I was being playful, then said it was important we knew where keys were. She said it was safety. She said it was common sense. She held her hand out like she wanted me to return it to the bowl. I did not. I said I was fine. For the first time, her calm slipped. Not into anger, into something colder. She said she did not like secrets in a shared home. She said it made her feel unsafe. The word unsafe again, like a stamp. I moved out on a gray afternoon while Liv was at work. I packed slowly, half expecting the door to open behind me. The hallway light clicked on early, as it always did now, even though it was daylight. The glow made the boxes look staged. I carried my things out in trips, leaving the door ajar between loads. Each time I came back in, I looked at the key bowl, the mugs, the suggestion of lemon in the air. It felt like leaving a museum display of someone else's life. On my final trip, I paused in the kitchen. My keys were on the counter beside my phone again, exactly like the first day. I stared at them. They looked like a gesture, an invitation, a way back to the beginning. I picked them up and did not put them in the bowl. Liv came home while I was loading the last box into a friend's car. She stood in the doorway and watched without speaking. Her hair was still neat. Her coat was buttoned. She looked like she had been prepared for a different scene and arrived at the wrong one. She asked where I was going. I told her I was moving out. My voice sounded flat, like it had been rinsed clean. Liv said we could talk about it. She said she did not understand. She said she thought we were doing well. She said she had tried to create a calm home. I said I needed to live somewhere I could breathe. Liv's face tightened, then softened again into politeness. She said she had a spare key. I said I knew. I walked past her. The hallway light glowed behind us like a spotlight. I left anyway. For a while, I slept on a friend's sofa. The place was messy and loud and alive. There were shoes by the door in random directions. There were mugs on tables. There were crumbs that no one wiped immediately. I slept better than I had in months. My phone stayed quiet. No alerts. No resets. I found myself waiting at 21:45 out of habit, then laughing softly at myself when nothing happened. My hands felt restless for a few days. I wiped counters that did not need wiping. I rinsed mugs twice. I heard imaginary calendar pings in my head. Then it began to fade, like a noise you only notice after it stops. When I went back to Liv's flat to collect the last few things, the hallway light clicked on as I entered. The key bowl waited. The air smelled of lemon. I felt my chest tighten. Liv was polite when I returned. Almost too polite. The flat looked perfect, cleaner than ever, like she had scrubbed out the fact I had been there. My room was empty except for the things I had left. The window was open slightly even though it was cold. The bed was made tight, hotel neat. Liv stood at the end of the hall and said I could take my time. She said she had made tea if I wanted one. I said no. I packed my last bag and went to the kitchen. My spare key was in the kitchen bowl. I picked it up. Liv watched me, eyes fixed on my hand. I put it in my pocket. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. Liv said calmly that it might be better if she kept it, just in case. I said no. That was the cleanest word I have ever said. We did not keep in touch. Sometimes I still think about the things that happened and wonder how it would sound if I told it fast. It would sound petty. A towel, a mug, a key bowl, a few calendar reminders, lemon spray, a hallway light. That is why it worked. It stayed beneath the level of story. It stayed in the domestic. If I described it, people would say she was tidy, she was anxious, she meant well. Maybe she did mean well. That does not change what it did to me. It made me smaller without ever asking me to shrink. It taught me to anticipate, to apologize, to move quietly inside someone else's comfort. That is the part that lingers, not the rules, the way my body learned them. People like to think control is loud, They picture shouting, insults, slammed doors. They picture bruises or obvious fear. What happened with Liv was clean. It was polite. It was framed as care. It did not ask for permission because it assumed it. It made my resistance feel like bad manners. That is the line I keep coming back to. The most effective control I have ever met came wrapped in courtesy. It came with timers and spreadsheets and a soft voice. It came with lemon and clean cloths and matching mugs. It came with a spare key kept just in case. It came with a warm hallway light waiting for me to step inside. I keep my keys in my pocket now, even at home. Not because I think someone will move them, because I like feeling them there. The small weight reminds me I can leave. It reminds me the door belongs to me too. Sometimes I still catch myself aligning my shoes by the door. Sometimes I still feel a flicker of guilt when I leave a mug on a table. I let the feeling pass. I let the mug sit. I let the crumbs exist for a while. I let the room be lived in. That is how I measure freedom now. Not in big acts. In small disobediences that no one else even notices. The last thing I remember from Liv's flat is the sound of the key bowl when I took my spare. A small clink, almost nothing. It sounded like a choice. It sounded like the end of a routine. I think that is why it stays with me. It was so quiet. The whole thing was quiet. Quiet enough that I stayed longer than I should have. Quiet enough that I apologized for wanting my own door closed. Quiet enough that I doubted myself instead of the systems. Quiet enough that I learned this one simple truth too late. If someone needs you to be smaller to feel safe, they will call it care. They will call it calm. They will call it home.